Hello students, welcome to BBA 407 Strategic Management. Today I will talk about part 1 of Strategy Analysis and Choice. Again, we are doing chapter 6. Here are the chapter objectives, which summarizes strategy analysis and choice, which largely involve making subjective decisions based on objective information. So in chapter 6, I will introduce you to important concepts that can help us generate feasible alternatives and evaluate those alternatives. We will also discuss behavioral aspects of strategy formulation, including politics, culture, ethics, and social responsibility considerations. I will conclude the chapter with a discussion of, indeed, a detailed discussion of SWOT analysis. As you can see in real life, strategists never consider all feasible alternatives that could benefit the firm, because there are an infinite number of possible actions and an infinite number of ways to implement those actions. Therefore, a manageable set of most attractive alternative strategies must be developed. Identifying and evaluating alternative strategies should involve many of the managers. Employees should get together, they should assemble the organization mission statement, perform an external audit, and conduct the internal audit. Alternative strategies proposed by participants should be considered and discussed in a meeting or series of meetings. Here is the strategy formulation analytical framework, which consists of 2 stages. Stage 1, the input stage. Stage 2, the matching stage. And stage 3, the decision stage. Important strategy formulation techniques can be integrated into a 3-stage decision-making framework, as shown in figure 6.2 of the textbook. The tools presented in this framework are applicable to all sizes and types of organizations and can help strategists identify, evaluate, and select strategies. In this analytical framework, we will only discuss few of them. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to discuss in detail all the components of these different stages. We will only discuss few of them. We will start our discussion with stage 2, the matching stage, the SWOT matrix. So if we look at stages of this analytical framework, you see that stage 1 always involves the input stage, which summarizes the basic input information needed to formulate strategies. So, a comprehensive framework involves 3 major stages. Stage 1 is always the input stage. Stage 2, the matching stage. And stage 3, the decision stage. In stage 2, in matching stage in other words, we focus on generating feasible alternative strategies by aligning or matching key external and internal factors. The techniques include, in stage 2, is the SWOT analysis. also known as the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats matrix. And stage 2 is the decision stage. SWOT matrix is an important matching tool that helps managers develop 4 types of strategies. So under SWOT matrix, we need to develop 4 types of strategies. SO strategy, WO strategy, ST strategy, and WT strategy. While developing the SWOT matrix, it is important to list in advance the firm's external threats and opportunities and internal strengths and weaknesses. Do not forget what we discussed in the beginning of class. Threats and opportunities are always external to the firm, like the economic and the political environment, the type of government, competitors, the competitive environment, whereas strengths and weaknesses are always internal to the firm, like the strength of the accounting and finance department, the strength or weaknesses of the marketing department, etc. After listing all of these factors, we devise a strategy for each of these situations: SO, WO, ST, and WT. Please make sure to remember or study what these strategies stand for. SO stands for strengths and opportunities. WO stands for weaknesses and opportunities. ST stands for strengths and threats. And WT stands for weaknesses and threats. So let's start with the SO and WO strategies. So what is an SO strategy? Which combines the firm's internal strength with the external opportunity. So this is also known as a maxi-maxi strategy, and it is the best case scenario. The best case scenario that optimizes our objectives. So what do we do in SO strategy? In SO strategy, we use a firm's internal strengths to take advantage of external opportunities. In a WO strategy, on the other hand, which you combine weaknesses and opportunities, we are always aimed at improving internal weaknesses by taking advantage of external opportunities. WO strategy is also known as mini-maxi strategy. Mini-maxi strategy. For instance, let's give an example for an SO strategy, which means is that we're combining internal strength with external opportunity. So how can we use as a firm our internal strengths to take advantage of the opportunities? Whereas in the WO strategies, those are the strategies that minimize weaknesses by taking advantage of opportunities. So the question we ask as a firm, how can we use our opportunities to overcome the weaknesses you are experiencing in the internal environment? ST strategy, on the other hand, we're using a firm's strengths to avoid or reduce the impact of external threats, which is also known as a maxi-mini strategy. Maxi-mini strategy. Whereas the WT strategy are defensive tactics directed at reducing internal weaknesses and avoiding external threats. We call this a mini-mini strategy because we're trying to minimize both factors, both the internal weaknesses in our internal environment and also to avoid the external threats at the same time. That's why it's called mini-mini strategy. For the ST strategy, the question we are asking, how can we take advantage of our strengths to avoid real and potential threats? Whereas in WT strategy, how can we minimize our weaknesses and avoid threats at the same time, which is a mini-mini strategy. So it's very important to know what each of these strategies stand for. If you don't know what they exactly stand for, you will have a hard time in constructing the SWOT matrix. So please make sure to understand, to carefully pay attention or to pay closer attention to what each of these strategies refer to. Okay? So here's a summary of the SWOT matrix. As we have done before, we list the firm's key external opportunities, external threats, internal strengths, and internal weaknesses. And we start developing one by one each strategy. So after listing all of these factors, we start with the SO strategy of matching the internal strength with the external opportunities, which is the best case scenario for maximizing our firm's objectives, which is also known as a maxi-maxi strategy. Again, the second step, we develop the WO strategy. We develop the ST strategy and we develop the WT strategy. So let's look at a real-world scenario of how we can construct the SWOT matrix. And also we have threats in the external environment, where we see more and more competitors in the industry. There have been price wars due to lack of differentiation. Or another threat might be a hostile government that tries to impose more taxation and rules and regulations on firms. So let's start developing or constructing each strategy, starting with SO. In the SO, the firm is using strengths to take advantage of the opportunities. It is a maxi-maxi strategy. So when we have many factors to consider, it may be helpful to construct a matrix to match individual strengths and weaknesses to the individual opportunities and the threats you have identified. To do this, we can construct a matrix such as the one below for each quadrant: SO, ST, WO, and WT. It is totally up to you to come up with a rational strategy. Use your common sense, for instance, when you're developing SO or ST. What you need to develop in SO is you're matching the internal strength with the external opportunities. Let's look at SO and look at the internal strength and external opportunities column, okay? So we are combining strong capital position, let's say, with a rise in M&A activity. Okay, so choose any factor you want, but make sure to use your common sense and to come up with a SO strategy. Maybe in the case of a strong capital position or a rise in the M&A activity, we recommend the firm to acquire a small competitor or supplier using backward integration strategy. So this is our resultant SO strategy. There may be other SO strategies that you can devise. There is no one single strategy. You can devise SO2, SO3, But for the time being, what I did was to match the strong capital position with a rise in M&A activity and come up with a recommendation. What is our recommendation given the internal and external factors? Is to acquire a small competitor or supplier using the backward integration strategy. For instance, you may also want to combine the best salespeople with more business graduates. Then what do we recommend the firm in terms of SO strategy? Is to hire more talent maybe. Hire more talent, another SO strategy. Now let's look at the WO strategy. What is the principle or rationale behind the WO strategy? Is how can you use your opportunities to overcome the weaknesses you are experiencing in your internal environment. So use the opportunity to overcome or minimize the weaknesses. So what you're looking at the column weaknesses, internal weaknesses, and you're trying to match it with the factors in the opportunities. Sorry, with the you're looking at the weaknesses, internal weaknesses, and matching it with the opportunities you're experiencing in the external environment. For instance, try to match a rise in M&A activity, which is opportunity, with one of the weaknesses, such as branding, right? Because you have problems in terms of branding. So the strategy we're devising or recommending is a WO strategy. But you should name that strategy. You can't just leave it like that. You can't just list your factors and identify the opportunities and threats. You need to come up with a resultant strategy. For instance, in terms of WO, we recommend the firm, let's say, to buy a competitor with better branding. Because if you're buying a competitor with better branding, that could compensate your internal weakness, which you're facing in the branding department. Now let's look at ST strategy. ST strategy is how can you take advantage of your internal strengths to avoid real and potential threats in your environment. So you're looking at the strength, internal strength column, and you're trying to match it with the factors in the external environment. This time looking at threats, right? You're trying to match the strength with the threats in the external environment. So this time, we're matching internal strength with external threat. For instance, try to match the strong capital position with a hostile government, right? I chose those two. Well, you can choose any factors you want, as long as you're following the rules, as long as it makes sense. So how can the firm avoid or minimize hostile government using strong capital position? So who are hostile governments? Hostile governments are not business friendly. For instance, hostile governments might be taxing the businesses more. So if you're a firm with strong capital position, you might devise a strategy like, let's say, donating money to the government for research and development. Research and development money for the government. So that you can get the hostile government on your side. Maybe in the meantime, you can convince the hostile government to lower the taxes. Okay? So then our ST strategy would be something like donate money to the hostile government by lobbying for lower taxation. So therefore, our ST strategy is donating more money to the hostile government by lobbying for lower taxation. But what about the WT strategy? Again, use your common sense. What does WT stand for? It is all about how can you minimize your weaknesses and avoid threats at the same time. Don't forget, this is a mini strategy. You're minimizing your weaknesses and avoiding threats. It is the most conservative strategy. Most conservative strategy. This is the most conservative strategy because you're trying to minimize the threat and weaknesses at the same time. That's why we call it mini. For instance, in this case, look at the W and T columns, right? Try to match, let's say, internal weakness like a recent scandal from product failure. I chose that one. You can choose other ones. And try to match that one with more competitors entering the market, right? So what kind of WT strategy would you devise after matching these two factors? Maybe recommend the firm to spin off or sell businesses that don't work or have failed. That way you can at least maintain efficiency and reduce costs. Therefore, WT strategy would be spin off or sell businesses that don't work or have failed, so that you can at least maintain the efficiency and better compete with your rivals. Again, thank you for listening to my lecture so far. In part 2 of my lecture, I will talk about the space matrix, and we will continue to discuss politics of governance and corporate governance in publicly traded companies. Thank you again, and see you in part 2.